charities must build into their culture to think outside the traditional box of fundraising and really get uncomfortable with attempting and adopting some new tech-savvy methods.
You're listening to Let's Imagine, an Imagine Canada podcast for everyone interested in social issues and the nonprofit sector. I'm your host, Bruce McDonald. At Imagine Canada, we believe that by leveraging our national vantage point, building cross-sector relationships, and sharing and developing our knowledge base, we can advance social, economic, and environmental justice through our collective action. Join us as we dive deep into conversations that have big implications for the nonprofit and charitable sector here in Canada. A special thank you to our knowledge partner, Carter's Professional Corporation, and our supporting partner, Blackbaud. Together, let's imagine a stronger future. Amid ongoing economic uncertainties and the global pandemic aftermath, nonprofit organizations have had to navigate a lot of change in recent years, shaping the industry towards increasingly digital experiences and processes. What's more, modern innovations are making their way into the nonprofit sector too, further changing the needs and expectations of prospects, donors, and stakeholders. Based on the needs of the sector, and back for the third year in a row, Blackbaud has compiled the results of their annual Status of Canadian Fundraising survey into a comprehensive benchmark report on how charities and nonprofits are faring in the current fundraising climate. This year's survey and corresponding report highlights some critical themes for those leading the way across the social goods sector in Canada. From fundraising results and income streams to AI adoption and digital maturity, today's session will examine some of the key findings and provide suggestions for those working to increase the results and evolve to embrace the rapidly advancing tech landscape. Here with Imagine Canada today to delve into these interesting and important results are two guests from Blackbaud. Tanya Turschic, Customer Success Manager, who, along with the team that she manages, works closely with the charities and nonprofits who contributed to the report data. And Phil Hunt, Senior Demand Generation Marketing Manager, who worked closely with the research team on the survey and report. I'd like to take a moment and welcome you both, Tanya and Phil, to Let's Imagine here today.
Thanks, Bruce. Real pleasure to be here today. And looking forward to our conversation about this year's findings of the Status of Canadian Fundraising report. My name's Phil. I'm the Senior Marketing Manager here at Blackbaud. I've been with Blackbaud for nearly 8 years now. I'm based out of the UK. You might be able to tell that from the accent. And initially led the European marketing team, and then for the last couple of years have led the combined international marketing team here at Blackbaud. So that covers Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, as well as Europe.
Thank you, Bruce. It's lovely to be here. Thank you for having me. I am Tanya. I am local to Toronto, Canada, born and raised, and I have the privilege of managing an incredible team of customer success managers across this country. I have been at Blackbaud for 9 years now, having come from the nonprofit sector myself. I'd previously worked at some organizations that are customers of Blackbaud's today, and have the privilege of continuing my work with them over the course of the last 9 years of my time at Blackbaud. So delighted to be here once again, and thank you for having me.
Well, welcome to you both. I'm really looking forward to today's conversation. Before we kind of jump in to the actual research findings, can you tell us a little bit about who you spoke to and what the demographics are that are represented in the survey responses? And Phil, maybe we'll come to you first on this.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the reason that we started pulling this research together in the first place is that we know benchmarking data can be a challenge to source and can be difficult to find for nonprofit organizations. So we started carrying out this research to see the big trends that were impacting nonprofits across our international regions, and in this case in particular in Canada. And it really helps our customers identify where and how they can learn from their peers and compare their experiences with the wider sector. For us at Blackbaud, it also helps us better engage with our customers by understanding the big concerns that they have. In terms of how we actually carry out this research then, so we work with an independent market researcher and data analyst to both help us write the survey in a non-leading way. Blackbaud are a technology company, so we have vested interests. So we work with a third party who helps make sure that they don't come across in any of the research that we do. And that then, same market researcher, helps us analyse the data, omit any incomplete or non-genuine responses, and tells us what's actually statistically significant and important in the findings. For this year's research, we surveyed over 500 nonprofit professionals working across lots of different sectors within Canada, lots of different organisation sizes as well. The people that we spoke to, over 50% of them were fundraisers, and then other respondents said that their roles were cross-functional. So, for example, leadership roles in their organisation. The majority of these people were senior fundraisers, either directors or managers or experienced non-managers, but we also had some CEOs and trustees in the sample as well, about 14% of the overall sample being those leadership personas. The subsectors that we surveyed reflect everything from healthcare to social care and services, education, and children and youth organisations as well. 19% of the organisations that we spoke to were small non-profits, 42% were then medium non-profits, and by that we mean organisations with an income between $1 and $10 million annually, and then 31% were large organisations of over $10 million income a year. Just one disclaimer to add at this point, and to keep in mind as we discuss some of these findings, overall, about 20% of the Canadian non-profit sector has an income of over $1 million, but this actually is the majority of our sample. So that might skew the findings ever so slightly towards larger organisations, just something to keep in mind. But we do think that these are broadly reflective of the experience of those larger orgs who we happen to speak to for this piece of research.
That's great. Thank you. And I think it provides some good context for understanding the research findings. So Tanya, we're going to come to you with the next question. In looking at the data around fundraising targets in the report, at 60%, most participants said they either met or exceeded their fundraising targets. There's more to the story with the following insight, which showed that there was an increase in organizations saying that they did not reach their fundraising targets when compared with last year's findings. But overall, there's positive trend towards growth. At 36%, more organizations are seeing income growth and decline. A further 20% say that their income has remained the same, highlighting a positive year-over-year direction. So Tanya, when looking at the drivers behind these results, what do you think are some of the major influencers?
Yeah, thanks for asking, Bruce. It was an interesting to dig through some of this data and the findings. So what we discovered here was 30% of the organizations said that their income increased in the last full financial year. And when we focus on them, we see that they rank major gifts as their main or their most important income stream. Major gifts were ranked higher than this year than in previous years, with 44% of organizations saying that they were a key stream. We also see that organizations who've increased their income have a more varied income mix, incorporating major donors, high volume individual giving and sustainer gifts, as well as grant income. And then on the opposite side, organizations who were most likely to say their income had declined were those that heavily relied on grants for their primary income. So I'm making a note here real quick in that there's nothing to question about grant income. There's nothing wrong with grant income, but a reliance on one income stream leaves organizations more open to risk, right? So grants happen to be where this is most visible. When we think about why this might be, I mean, we know that the relief funds from COVID-19 have had largely ended. So there may be a gap in grant funding that has emerged as a result. But back to major streams of income, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the major gifts, right? Major gifts are the largest donations an organization receives. Major gift fundraising is one of the most important pursuits an organization can undertake. It's also one of the most challenging. You need to identify major gift prospects, cultivate the major gift prospect, strategize on the ask, right? That's every ask will have a different strategy. Think about that. And then ultimately retaining that major gift donor. And so having a good retention strategy can make the difference between a one-time major gift and a long, fruitful relationship with that major donor. And I can say that we've witnessed organizations who leverage our Blackbaud solutions, identify and engage supporters with insights and workflows backed by a CRM built specifically for fundraising organizations. And that CRM is Razor's Edge NXT. Through advanced features like Prospect Insights and the Major Giving Work Center, organizations have been able to steward prospects effectively and build high-impact supporter relationships. The retention piece is key here. So some of the simple yet highly effective strategies I've seen successful organizations implement are small things like issuing a handwritten note or delivering a phone call from a member of their leadership team. One particular organization continues to top the charts at major gift retention by executing this handwritten note tactic, thoughtfully ensuring the donor's wishes for the use of their gifts are fulfilled. Another organization we worked with, they host annual donor recognition events or gala dinners, offering an opportunity for the donors to see the organization's work in action. It's pretty beautiful when you're a part of some of these milestone moments. But there's more that we've seen in what organizations are doing to increase their income, and it involves having that varied income mix and responding to the new giving trends, tapping into the younger generations and meeting them where they feel the most comfortable donating and providing them with the tools and the means to donate quickly, easily, on the go, and for a cause that they feel most passionate about. We talked about the need for a variety of income streams, right? Our Status of Canadian Fundraising report revealed that sustainer gifts, also known as recurring giving, was third on the list for income types. It's critical for organizations to invest in a solid sustainer giving program and how to convert those one-time donors to recurring, loyal supporters. Blackbaud produces another benchmark report for enterprise online fundraising and email marketing solution, and that's sort of an online tool. And a statistic I'd like to share about sustainer revenue here is in 2023, total sustainer revenue grew by almost 24% year over year, and total transactions also increased by 20%. The average sustainer gift grew slightly, as well as the percentage of revenue from sustainers increased by over 22%, right? This means that nearly a quarter of Canadian online giving came as recurring revenue. So all these metrics, simply stated, point to a healthy and growing sustainer program in Canada.
And that's really great data because I think intuitively, a lot of organizations talk about and know the importance of having balanced and diversified revenue streams. But I think this also really highlights the importance of investing in those who are already connected to you, that sustainer idea, and making sure that you're providing great stewardship, great value, great authenticity and transparency to make sure that those folks are returning to support your cause. But we'll shift gears a little bit because I think what was interesting was also the report talking about the digital space. And so another major factor around performance is digital maturity. So what did the survey data show and how are organizations faring with respect to digital adoption and engagement? So Phil, we'll ask this one to you.
Yeah, thanks. As you say, we asked our survey participants to rank the nonprofit on a digital maturity spectrum ranging from 1 to 10. And for the last 3 years, we've been asking this same question to really chart how this number and the score is changing. Based on the data, we can see that the average digital maturity score for Canada in the last 12 months was 5.5. We saw 16% of organisations rate themselves an 8 or higher, and 19% of organisations put themselves between a 1 or a 3 on that 10-point scale. We also found that larger organisations were significantly more likely to rate their organisation as digitally mature in comparison to smaller organisations who typically fell below the average on that digital maturity spectrum. That's not to say, though, that small organisations can't be digitally mature. They absolutely can be, and we often see this where there is a dedicated culture of building a digitally savvy organisation that they can achieve a high digital maturity score. It's more a case of, if you're a larger organisation, you might have more resources or time to invest in the infrastructure to help you build that digital maturity. But there's also different challenges that come with being a larger organisation. So you might have more stakeholders or more siloed teams and ways of working that are more difficult to break down. So we've actually had some conversations with small and non-profits who are in a position where they can have a really engaged leadership team working directly with their frontline fundraisers, for example, and that's really helped build that digital maturity score. So definitely something that an organisation of any size can achieve, and something that we always are conscious of flagging here. It doesn't necessarily equate that because you're able to invest in it, you'll have a high digital maturity score. It's absolutely something that any organisation could achieve. For the first time this year, we were also able to prove out those with a below average digital maturity score were more likely to say that their income was declining. So this is something that we've asked for a few years and we've not had a statistically significant finding there. But this year we were able to see that that was a statistically significant trend, that organizations with a lower digital maturity score were less likely to have achieved their fundraising goals and more likely to say that they were declining in terms of their income year over year. So really important to focus on that digital maturity element and embedding that culture across your organization as kind of the bedrock of any future success.
And those are really interesting data points. I mean, even 4 years after the start of the global pandemic, where we saw early on organizations really struggling to move into the digital space rapidly, it's interesting to see that there are some that are still working towards that, and that now they're potentially witnessing a gap in performance as it relates to fundraising or revenue generation. So really interesting information. There's a wealth of information in the report that our listeners can access after today's episode to go deeper. But because of how popular the topic is and that it represents a full section in the report, we'd like to focus a bit on AI, or artificial intelligence, for a moment, and some of the correlations and insights reflected in the survey data. Can you maybe provide and share some of those insights or highlights with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So this was a new area for us in this year's report. Each year when we build our survey and look to do this research, we try to think about what's a hot topic or an emerging trend that we should dig a little bit deeper into. And we've heard a lot about AI over the last couple of years with the emergence of generative AI tools like ChatGPT. And when we surveyed our participants about this, we found that the results and attitudes towards AI could be quite polarizing. So at this point in time, AI isn't particularly well understood across the whole sector. A majority of respondents said that they could explain what AI was in simple terms. So about 67% said that they could explain what AI was. But mainly the use cases are currently generative AI. So that's things like ChatGPT, which is used for writing email or social media posts. And there's little use today of things like the predictive AI. And that's the sort of AI that could help, do the heavy lifting for you, all of the data work in your database. So for example, helping you analyze your supporter data to identify top prospects or what the best time to engage with supporters is based on their historic giving behaviors. And we also found that whilst a lot of organizations say they're interested or excited by AI, there's a lot of challenges in terms of the resources to explore AI properly, but equally a general acceptance that AI is not going to go away anytime soon, that it's just a new normal and will start to permeate its way across and through all aspects of the nonprofit organization. To continue some of that polarization, we found that whilst most people were positive or excited by AI, there is a lot of concern also around AI at the moment, particularly around things like misinformation, data security, reputational risk or bias. And we've also seen in some of the free text responses that we were able to put into the survey questions, some people having more deeper rooted concerns about how AI might harm or otherwise impact negatively the more personal and human element of the fundraising profession, which is fundamentally a sort of person-to-person relationship. So lots of really interesting challenges sort of bound up together there around AI. Like I mentioned a moment ago, the majority of organizations say they are currently using AI, but we also found that only 5% of organizations have a policy in place around the way that they want to use AI, which feels like a really important first step for any organization wanting to explore AI, is just determining the ways that you can or should be responsibly using that as a new tool in your arsenal. So we'd strongly recommend writing an AI policy that might be a standardized approach to transparency, data protection, misinformation, defining the tools and the type of data that you want to use with AI, and then kind of defining the use cases that your organization wants to explore. If we think that most organizations are saying they are challenged and limited by resources, then maybe we'll want to pick a couple of particular areas that we want to investigate more thoughtfully and more completely first of all. So by doing this, you could remove some of those key concerns about misinformation or data security. So for example, one of the things that you might want to do is rule out using something like ChatGPT, which is a free, publicly available tool, but by its very nature means putting your data into a public third-party tool, which is an app that you don't control. So to tie all of that back to some of our earlier discussion about income and fundraising performance, we also found that organizations that are prioritizing AI or able to prioritize AI are more likely, and significantly more likely at that, to say that their income had increased over the last 12 months compared to organisations who say that AI isn't a priority. And perhaps unsurprisingly, there is also a correlation between organisations who have a high digital maturity and their use of AI. So organisations who are using AI score at a 6.8 in terms of that digital maturity spectrum that we were talking about before, compared to organisations who aren't using AI who are 5.1, which is slightly below the average score for digital maturity.
So interesting as organizations are kind of thinking about and exploring it. So some really great data in the report. But I guess the question is, how does this translate into the on-the-ground experience? So Tanya, from your perspective, how does this align or differ from what you're learning from your close work with charities and nonprofits? And are there any examples that you're able to share about your customer experiences, successes, or challenges when it comes to organizations being more tech savvy?
Indeed. Thank you, Bruce. Yeah, I mean, there's certainly alignment here in what Phil has discussed. Overall, it's about being nimble and recognizing the need for change, right? To have awareness of the ever-evolving tech landscape and to dare to keep up. So I think that everyone's wowed by the whole AI trend and equally threatened by the fear of not keeping up. And so we often hear that nonprofits wonder how AI will impact security, organizational change, accessibility, and ultimately donor perception. But organizations can overcome the challenges of AI by keeping humans and thoughtful intervention at the center of AI transformation. And so what we're seeing is, organizations who welcome this journey, they're embracing it and creating new positions within their organizations to intentionally stay ahead of digital growth and proactively ensuring that they're able to meet the incoming donors' expectations. As our donor demographic ages, right, and the younger generations step up, it's certainly critical to lay the groundwork now for future support. And so one of our flagship products, Blackbaud's Razor's Edge NXT, has extended functionality that is key to allowing organizations to prepare while still meeting the needs of their existing donor base. So AI can make the most of constrained nonprofit time while delivering more personal experiences. I have another organization we worked with who uses our AI-driven suggested ask amounts to maximize donor giving in donation form asks, and then leveraging the AI functionality in email marketing to create tailored messaging and conditional content. So you're speaking directly to the needs and wants and interests of an individual using that tailored messaging directly in your email correspondence with them. And I'll have to say, with newer generations of tech-savvy donors emerging, organizations need to be agile and diversify their offerings in order to tap into these flavors and interests of the younger demographics. And this includes new ways to serve up giving forms, capturing an interest of choice charities and other causes that support social justice. Thinking even outside the box about payment options, right? Via digital wallets, direct debit, even cryptocurrency as an offering, which a few customers have actually experimented with. It's pretty fascinating. All that to say, I would say that charities must build into their culture to think outside the traditional box of fundraising and really get uncomfortable with attempting and adopting some new tech-savvy methods. But of course, change management is the biggest barrier to all of this. It can truly paralyze the movement. And at times, it can take so long that you've missed the opportunity to capitalize on something fundamentally transformational.
Yeah, it's so interesting. It's really fascinating also to hear the range of experiences that you're observing with some of your clients and customers. So to leave our listeners with some ideas for areas of opportunity, where are charities and nonprofits across the sector finding the best results and the most value from their technology? And we'll come to both of you on this one, but Phil, we'll start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is also a question that we tried to embed throughout the survey and the research is what drives the biggest value, what creates the most impact for organizations when it comes to using their technology and looking for opportunities to evolve it. So when we asked organizations to describe what would have the biggest impact, what came out top for all of the different segments that we surveyed was improved data management. Improved data management came out at the top for all of the groups that we looked at, regardless of their digital maturity to some extent. So what we mean by this is having cleaner, more comprehensive data on supporters that can be shared with relevant stakeholders across the organisation. So giving access to, your fundraisers, your events team, your leadership to the data that they need and empowering them with the data points and touch points that they need to make informed decisions. After that, we found that improving or integrating multi-channel communications was often number 2 on the list. And then better training to make use of the tools that are already in place and better integrating the technology already in place at their organisation were with you the big things that were recurring topics for organisations to want to prioritise. So I said that data management was the key thing for all of these groups, which is true, but digital maturity does have an influence on the extent to which data management is important. So we found that the least tech-savvy orgs still said that they'd get the most out of data management, but they were also less likely to say that they'd benefit from more modern tech or better integrated systems or more training as well, despite highlighting the fact that they still needed better data. So as we spoke about throughout our conversation today, there's a cultural dimension to some of these decision-making processes as well. So if everyone benefits from better data, we can see that the route there isn't viewed uniformly, or that different organisations are going to see a different way to achieving that outcome, which I think was really interesting in our research to see that there's kind of a North Star, but lots of different ways of getting there and lots of organisations having different priorities as to how they achieve that better supporter view.
Yeah, and I'll just tag on to that, Phil, just with reference to the differences depending on the organizational size, right? So smaller nonprofits would benefit from reaching new audiences through this collaboration and cross-departmental collaboration, and they're most likely to get value from introducing purpose-built technology. This suggests that they don't necessarily have a strong tech stack to begin with, but they do see the value of introducing a solution specifically built for nonprofit organizations. On the other side, larger nonprofits, they would find the most value in driving technological efficiency, ranking better data management and integrations as equally valuable opportunities.
These are great insights. And as we close the conversation today, are there some ideas or thoughts that you'd like to recap for our listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd summarize a few points, so 3 points to leave people with as we think about the status of Canadian fundraising in our 2024 results. Like we said at the top, the results are broadly positive. There are more organisations growing than declining. So there's a net positive trend there. And it's been a tough few years for the sector generally. So that's a really positive takeaway that we can take from this report. When we look at the reasons for those growth and some of the things to keep in mind as we look at what's driving growth, we can see that organisations with a more diverse income stream tend to perform better. So as Tanya was saying earlier, major donors, grants and individual giving being a good sort of 3 pillars or 3 legs of the stool to orient around in terms of building for a stronger future. So one piece of advice that I suppose we'd leave people with is look for ways to experiment and incorporate new or different channels into your mix to de-risk a reliance on any one area. And that's something that we've seen for the last couple of years now, is that intentional testing, trying of new channels is an attitude that leads to growth. Not everything will work, so it's important to sort of manage your risk accordingly and to not be overly ambitious around that, but that sort of growth mindset as to trying something new is really important for growing your organisation. Beyond that, we can see that those who are embracing technology tend to perform better. There's a link between attaining your targets and your digital maturity score. And like I mentioned before, that's doesn't mean that you need to be a large organisation in order to do that. A lot of this is cultural and about focusing on the way that you place technology at the heart of your customer engagement process. So really orienting around the way that you're using technology at your organisation, regardless of the size of that organisation. And while AI is still new for many organisations and the resources to explore it can be an issue, most people agree that it isn't going to go away anytime soon. So a good first step around thoughtfully engaging with AI would be to draft that AI policy, define which tools you're going to use to explore and try out new things when it comes to AI, and in that way safeguard your organisation from and your supporters from any of those perceived challenges around misinformation or data security.
Yeah, it's so important, Phil. Just these areas that you're calling out. And I'm going to double click into the area of your target market, right? And the demographics in which our customers serve. So my final thoughts here today are around, in general, giving trends of our Canadian donors, but through the lens of our customers that myself and my team work very closely with every day. And so we're all aware that nonprofits across the region, they face the challenges of competing philanthropic dollars, the changing donor demographics, limited marketing and communication resources, and so on, right? That list can go on and on. So for organizations, there must be strategic and innovative direction in their fundraising and marketing efforts in order to overcome some of these challenges and to support their mission. So organizations, they've got to remain vigilant and meticulous and super thoughtful in their approach to targeting supporters. And now from an engagement perspective, I can't highlight more the importance of the potential hole that could grow if Canadian charities aren't responding to the newer giving trends and the obvious trends surging from our younger generations. It is the younger generation that has to be captivated. They need to be spoken to using the tools that resonate with them today. And they needed it yesterday. So with a large majority of millennials and the Gen Z leveraging social media platforms, charities have to experience an increase in sharing of their content, commenting, influencing, and following those feeds. And so there's a tremendous opportunity here to ensure fundraising momentum is not lost on our younger generations and supporters. Implementing a powerful and alluring strategy to specifically engage these young Canadians will be of utmost importance.
Before we let you both go, is there anything coming up that folks in our sector should be being mindful of or being aware of?
Yeah, absolutely. So at the risk of making a shameless plug here, our next piece of research will be coming out in a couple of months' time in November. We've already carried out another survey to 1,000 consumers across Canada to better understand the way that different generations give and interact. And I think this really ties back to some of the things that Tanya was saying there about how do you differently need to engage Gen Z or millennials. So we've surveyed Gen Z, millennials, Gen X and boomers to find out both the types of organizations that they want to support, the ways that they want to engage with those organizations through donations or through volunteering, and the best channels to engage with those groups. So if you're looking for a starting point as to how you can take some of the information that we've given today in our benchmarking report and actually apply it to your supporter base, then keep an eye out for our next report in a couple of months' time.
Tanya, Phil, thank you so much for taking time out of, I know, your incredibly busy schedules to talk with us about the findings from this report. For organizations in our sector, having access to good data like this, to ask questions and invite them to consider how their practices are, or maybe not, keeping pace is really important. So again, thanks for your time. So glad you could join us on Let's Imagine.
Thanks, Bruce. Yeah, real pleasure to join you today for today's conversation. I hope that everyone gets a chance to download the report and find some interesting information in there.
Amazing. And likewise on this end, thank you, Bruce. Thank you, Imagine Canada. Phil, always a pleasure to partner with you. Thank you, all those listeners, and appreciate the time today. And thanks, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Let's Imagine podcast. For full show notes and to subscribe to our newsletter so you never miss an episode, please visit our website, www.imaginecanada.ca. Also, if you really like this episode, we invite you to leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen to this podcast, as this helps other people discover us and engage in these conversations. And again, thanks to our sponsors, Carter's Professional Corporation and Blackbaud, for supporting our podcast.